In our own time, there's a great crisis of faith. There's so many people who are seeking peace and happiness in the things of the world, in pleasures, drugs, pornography, money. So many people who don't know the meaning of their lives, who live in a vacuum, not knowing who they are, for what they were made. They're truly like sheep without a shepherd, and they're yearning for something more.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to Armor of God again. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, everybody. And hopefully you'll be edified with what we've put together for you here. Well, like I said previously, I love sharing clips of the lesser-known priests. Now, if it's someone like Father Chad Ripperger, you'll often see that whenever he speaks or videos of him released, people are so excited to listen to him. But there are a lot of powerful, important, and beautiful messages that we can learn from the lesser-known priests, at least here on the social media. And so that's what I'd like to do in this video. And to kick this off, for the first clip in this compilation will be from Father Joseph.
Fear is useless, but if you want to be afraid of something, I'll tell you what to fear. Fear the destruction of body and soul in Gehenna. Gehenna literally meant Valley of Hinnom. Located in the south of Jerusalem, Gehenna was a terrifying place where in ancient times children were sacrificed to pagan gods. It was a place thought to be haunted and accursed. In the time of Jesus, it was a place where trash was dumped and burned, and this smoldering refuse extended as far as the eye could see. Even from miles away, people could see smoke rising from the ravine of Gehenna. It was a place of death and of decay. Jesus is using this place so familiar to the Jewish mind to symbolize the eternal separation from God. He's telling them, don't fear men, don't fear the sufferings of this world, fear only to be separated from divine love. He says, do not be afraid. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a small coin? Yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father knowing. Even all the hairs on your head are counted. This is an incredible image. In first century Palestine, sparrows were the food of the destitute. 2 sparrows could be purchased for the modern equivalent of a few pennies. And Jesus is telling them, these tiny little birds, worthless in the eyes of men, are constantly in the mind of God when they're soaring and when they fall. If God so loves what you consider worthless, how much more does he love you who were made in his image and likeness? God even knows the number of hairs on your head. Do you know how many hairs are on your head? Jesus is telling us, God knows more about you than you know about you. God is so consumed with you that he thinks about you more than you think about yourself. Fear nothing. When St. Maximilian Kolbe stepped forward in the Nazi death camp at Auschwitz to die in place of another prisoner, witnesses say he was absolutely fearless. And his fearlessness so unnerved the Nazi guards that their hands trembled as they led him away. But are our lives characterized by this same radical trust, by this bold proclamation of the truth? Far too often we allow ourselves to be suffocated and paralyzed by fear. And the world offers us all kinds of things to be fearful of. Every moment of every day, the world offers us something new to fear, offers us a reason to remain paralyzed. Yet the message of Jesus Christ and the constant proclamation of the church is consistent. Do not be afraid. It's the most frequently repeated phrase in the entire Bible, appearing exactly 365 times. When newly elected Pope St. John Paul II stepped to the ambo in the Sistine Chapel to deliver his first homily as Pope, he began with the words, do not be afraid. No matter what your situation today, no matter what your struggle, no matter what your cross, no matter what you've done in your past, if you strive to love God, if you live in the truth, then you must fear nothing.
If you've been watching the videos on this channel for quite a while now, you know I've shared a lot of stuff about the guardian angels a lot. So here's one that I'd like to share with all of you here.
I just wanted to briefly share with you a story of a fellow Franciscan. His name is Father John Bach, 87 years old. And on the Feast of the Guardian Angels, he was driving to say Mass for the feast. And while he was driving, a fellow driver lost control of their car, had a stroke. And there is video of the fellow driver's car lifting up and going over Father John's car. It's really a very fascinating story. And people say all the time, why don't miracles happen? Well, maybe you missed this story. Maybe you need to know that God still works through guardian angels, and having a vehicle lift up over the priest's car, which got caught on video. I know when I saw it, I thought, well, praise God. Hopefully you will as well.
Now there are a couple more clips that I'd like to share with you in this video. But before I share those clips with you, since there are a lot of you who are new here and probably just catching up with some of the things I've shared in the past, therefore, let me just share a few here that I've shared before. The first on the list be from Father John Zeta, as he explains demons cannot kill us because they're not allowed to do that by God. However, just because they can't kill us doesn't mean they stop trying. And in this clip, Father Zeta explains to us how they try to do that.
See, one of the things that demons cannot kill you, even though they say they're going to kill you, they can't. But one of the things they do will try to tempt a person to commit suicide. I had a woman who had bought a ceramic doll on eBay, okay? And as soon as she got it, she just felt something wasn't right. She felt there was something unnatural wrong about it. So she had all kinds of problems. She went back and forth. Then she started hearing voices of two individuals, an older woman and a younger man that she claimed were talking to her, that they had committed suicide some time before. They wanted her to join them because it was very beautiful and wonderful. And she really became problematic, and then she actually sent the doll back. But see, she had already opened the door. We sent her to, the psychiatrist. She was on medication. She hated the medication because she said it made her feel like a zombie. And one day I got an email from her, a text message from her mother telling me that she had actually taken her life the night before. She had taken an overdose of medication. She had taken alcohol, and she slit her wrists. They finally convinced her to kill herself, which she did. So it's one of my sad cases where, and again, it all came down to a cursed object, which she bought and brought into her home. And then she followed through and listened to the voices that were attached to it.
The next clip is from Father Daniel Rehill, as he explains something about evil that we often overlook. But judging from what we've listened to from various exorcists before, I don't think this should come as a surprise at all.
Evil's very organized. I don't think people understand how organized evil is. They're very organized. I remember years ago, Fulton Sheen talking about it was Lent and he was flying from one place to another on a Friday, and the flight attendant asked him if he was going to have lunch, and he said, "No, I'm fasting, it's Lent." And then the flight attendant asked the woman next to him, sitting next to him in his aisle, "Can I get you anything for lunch?" She said, "No, I'm fasting too." And when the woman walked away, Fulton Sheen said to the woman, "Oh, are you Catholic?" She said, "No, I'm a witch, and I'm fasting for abortion." Can you imagine? See, they're very diligent in what they're doing, and sometimes I think they may be more diligent than the Catholics. So we have to be a people who are incredibly bold and persevere and spread the word. Many Catholics have no idea the power that they wield, or they could wield, if they started praying and fasting and doing some of these things.
And the following clip is from another exorcist that I listen to a lot as well, Monsignor Stephen Rossetti. One of the things that make the learning very easy is when these priests share stories, and it helps to remember the lessons much easier. Here, Monsignor Rossetti shares the story of a woman who got quite deep with the occult.
And so one of my missions is to warn people. I got an email from a woman, and she said during the pandemic that she got into witchcraft. She went online and did these curses and stuff, and consulted mediums and did all that kind of, occult stuff. And she did it all, And she said, of course, then, not surprisingly, quote, all hell broke loose. I mean, there are things flying around the room, the door smashing, and just all like a bad movie. It's like a bad movie. And it does happen, by the way. So like a bad movie, and then she couldn't stand going to church. She felt this nausea, she felt enraged, and all this sort of demonic stuff, and it was really bad. She realized she did something wrong. So she went to confession, she went to Mass and stopped doing all those things, and she started going to our online session. We have these once a month online deliverance sessions. She said, "I'm getting better. I've been doing these sessions for a year now every month, and I'm getting a lot better." She's like, "I can tolerate going to church now. All the stuff in the room isn't flying around and crashing. I don't feel as nauseous about religious things." And she said, "I passed this black thread through through her intestines." So when a witch's curse is lifted, oftentimes there will be a passing of what we call a bolus. So the witch's it's this dark energy thing. And it was embarrassing, of course, but she passed and she's much better. So all I can say is, I mean, we get the people. I mean, we get the people who decide to go into, one woman went to Tibetan Buddhism and we're still praying over her, and she was cursed, and a lot of other different things. So all I can say is when you go down that path, is there are consequences to doing these things.
Now coming back to, and forgive me for saying this, but please allow me to put it this way, the lesser-known priests. This isn't in any way to disrespect them, and we're blessed here with a community of people who want to learn more about our faith, and so I hope that by making full use of the platform that we have here, we can do our parts to share the messages from these priests. And I really like this one from Father Joseph, which I shared a bit of it in the beginning of this video.
In our own time, there's a great crisis of faith. There's so many people who are seeking peace and happiness in the things of the world, in pleasures, drugs, pornography, money. So many people who don't know the meaning of their lives, who live in a vacuum, not knowing who they are, for what they were made. They're truly like sheep without a shepherd, and they're yearning for something more. We often hear today about the new evangelization, this new effort to bring the gospel to countries that were once evangelized but have lost their Christian identity. But St. John Paul II said that the new evangelization is not simply about devising new techniques or new methods, but essentially it's about a new ardor for holiness, a zeal to be authentically Christian, a desire to be saints. One day Mahatma Gandhi was walking together with a Presbyterian missionary through the streets of South Africa. The two suddenly found their way blocked by some young thugs, and the Presbyterian missionary took one look at them and decided to run for it. But Gandhi stopped him. And he asked, doesn't the New Testament say that if an enemy strikes you on the right cheek, you should turn and offer him the left as well? And somewhat amazed by the question, the missionary mumbled, it was only a metaphor. And Gandhi said, I'm not so sure. I suspect Jesus meant you to show courage, to be willing to take a blow, even several blows, to show you will not strike back, nor will you be turned aside. And when you do that, it calls on something in human nature, something that makes his hatred decrease and his respect increased. I think Christ grasped that, and I've seen it work myself. Gandhi would also say that he had great respect for Christianity, and he read from the Bible every day. I like your Christ, he would say, but I don't like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. The world today needs witnesses. You see how powerful is the witness of holiness. It draws others to Christ by our charity, our patience, our humility, our sincerity, our works of service. We bear witness to Jesus Christ. We become living signs that lead others to God, and the world needs witnesses. There are so many people in your classrooms, where you work, in your circle of friends, who don't know the meaning of their lives, who are dying for something true, something beautiful, something that gives purpose to their lives. They are dying for you without knowing, to bring them Jesus Christ. Our children today are thirsting for Christ. And you, parents, make him visible by loving your spouse unconditionally, by your patience in suffering, by your perseverance in difficulties. The world is full of lost, wandering sheep. It needs disciples, men and women who will live the gospel unreservedly, men and women who will lead the sheep to the shepherd. But before we can do this, before we can be genuine witnesses, before we can lead the sheep to the shepherd of souls, we ourselves must first know the shepherd. We have to take time for prayer in our lives. We have to make room for God in our busy schedules. We have to learn to pray together as a family, to break open the Word of God. We have to return to the confessional, where we encounter the mercy and compassion of the Good Shepherd. Only then, only when we ourselves have experienced his love and his mercy, can we be authentic witnesses to the gospel. There's a story told that when Mother Teresa was visiting one of the many convents she'd founded, the superior of that convent told her, Mother, we don't have enough time to do our work with the poor. There's just not enough hours in the day. There's so many of them. And Mother Teresa responded, then you need to pray more. When they added another full hour of prayer each day, they somehow found they had enough time to do even more for the poor in the city.
And you know how much I love to share stuff about Padre Pio. I've made a lot of videos about him, and here is one that I'd like to share with you in this video too.
In his 56 years as a priest, Padre Pio would hear confessions almost every day for 8 to 10 hours. In those days, men and women were separated. Women would go to confession in the regular confessional with a screen between them. But I had the chance to visit Padre Pio's San Giovanni Rotondo shrine and see where he heard confessions of men in the sacristy of the church. Father Pio would sit on a hard, uncushioned chair with no armrest for 8 to 10 hours in the corner of the sacristy. The man going to confession would kneel before him on a wooden prie-dieu, and so they were looking face to face, maybe a foot and a half apart. Padre Pio would look into the eyes of the penitent and hear his confession. And most of the time, regardless of what we used to hear, most of the time he would be very gentle. But once in a while, he would say, "You're missing something. You need to examine your conscience more closely." Or, "What about this event in your life?" This amazing gentleness of God to the sinner through St. Padre Pio is a beautiful story of God's mercy. There were two good people who visited St. Padre Pio for confession. One of them was a young seminarian who later became John Paul II, and it was he who canonized Padre Pio. The other was a young soldier. This was at the time of the war. A young soldier who wasn't a Catholic visited San Giovanni Rotondo and had a chance to visit with Padre Pio. This young man was named Clem Neff, and now we know him as Clem Neff. Padre Pio, Clem wasn't a Catholic. Padre Pio said, "You are going to be a priest, a Capuchin priest." That amazed the young man, who became Father Clem, a Capuchin in our order, of course. I had the great blessing of being able to visit with Clem for some years in Victoria. This only points out the great mercy and gentleness of God.
And for the second part of this video, I'd like to again continue where I left off with Father Gabriel Amorth. I must say this though before I go any further. The subject this time is a little disturbing, but I make sure to include Father Amorth's warning at the end. So here's the question. Since baptized Christians are commonly called children of God, can those who worship the evil one be called children of the devil? Well, for one, according to Father Amorth here, the evil one does not desire brothers or friends, much less children. He desires only slaves, whom he buys by promising them a guaranteed and unlimited enjoyment of things with. And here is the great lie. Unchecked liberty, which is the foundation of those who worship the devil itself. And so how does one become a devil worshipper? Well, here Father Amorth explains that it is done through a rite of consecration to the evil one, where the person hands himself over to the devil in body and soul, asks to be received among his hosts, and thus enters into a sect. It normally involves an agreement written in blood. Usually the consecration happens during a collective rite, often with a black mass, in which one is initiated into the sect and into the satanic practices. The contract of blood can also be done individually, as with religious vows, which can be made publicly, or privately and singularly in secret before God. All these cases concern a true and proper selling of the soul to the devil, who maintains his tragic promises, but without ever giving any happiness but only innumerable sufferings. In a word, being consecrated to the devil guarantees a life of pure hell on earth and an eternal hell in the afterlife. And Father Amorth rightly pointed out, according to his experience, these persons do not ever receive peace, and they leave behind them a trail of sorrow, solitude, and death. Unfortunately, many books and pamphlets circulate among young people, and there are also internet sites that teach the formulas of consecration to the Prince of Darkness. It is an extremely dangerous practice. It may be done as a joke or seriously, alone or in a group. It makes no difference, because it can bear very heavy consequences. Even years later, when after having settled down with a spouse, children, and a good job, one must still confront a burdensome diabolical possession. For this reason, it is necessary to think of the consequences of such a choice, which is often irreversible, or at least very difficult to reverse. And Father Amorth pointed out that he knew some people who have left, but only after an enormous struggle, and often while being threatened by the followers. Even more, they always remain marked in their psyche and in their body, often enduring years and years of exorcisms in order to be liberated from the devil and the diabolical possessions on their backs. In recent times, various cases of sensational homicides have been reported in the media that are surely ascribable to a particular influence of the devil, perhaps the result of some pact contracted with him. For example, there is the case of the 3 girls who in June of 2000 killed Sister Maria Laura, and regarding this particular case, Father Amorth did not believe that they were possessed by demons. Rather, he believed that they acted under the devil's potent inspiration. The cynicism, the brutality, the lack of restraint in the wounding of that poor religious could not have been solely their own invention. Immediately afterward, 2 of the 3 went to an amusement park, while the third went home to clean the kitchen knife they used to kill her, replacing it in the drawer. This incredible story confirms the risks that are in play for today's young people. In fact, in Italy, there are a few hundred satanic sects. Generally, each one has a few members. According to Father Amorth, it is difficult to do a precise charting of them, because they always act in the shadows. And Father Amorth also pointed out that it is not necessary to become a formal member in any satanic group or cult in order to serve the devil and become one of his followers. There are many, unfortunately, who do not officially consecrate themselves to the devil, but choose to follow his basic principles, and as a result they place their souls at great risk. And one might wonder what powers the devil gives to his devotees, along with the indecipherable sufferings. There is an interminable list. Some powers are clearly of a diabolical origin. Others require some discernment. According to Father Amorth, typical powers that are the direct consequence of the sale of one's soul to the devil and of their adopted identity at consecration are riches, free sex, and unlimited power. But at the beginning, everything comes easily and seems to be a great and beautiful affair. But all of it involves false illusions. Not long afterward, indescribable sufferings take over, signs that the devil has taken them for a ride, because his objective is to make you a slave and ruin your life. Father Amorth included the case of a young woman as an example to help illustrate this point, where this young woman had accepted the offer of consecrating herself to the devil in exchange for a luminous career. Soon afterward, she scaled the heights of her company, earning an impressive salary and a high social reputation. At this point, it seems the devil had maintained his promise, but in exchange he truly asked for her soul. She found herself living with intense moments of hatred towards certain individuals that were so strong and sudden that each time she would have to shut herself in the bathroom, beating her fists and her head against the wall and screaming with pain. She bitterly repented it, and only after a long journey, which Father Amorth made with her, did she manage to regain her liberty definitively. But the price was high. She had to give back the gifts given to her by the evil one, and even before she had a chance to renounce her career, she was fired. But here's the good news, however. She was completely free eventually from the devil's grasp. The powers that those who practice spiritism call gifts can also be tied to magic rites done personally or under submission. Among these are foresight, which is the capacity to see things that will happen in the future; clairvoyance, which is the possibility of seeing things and persons in other places that are not visible; visions and apparitions; the phenomena of automatic writing, which is the inspiration to write messages dictated by external entities; levitation; and bilocation. At other times they can hear voices that suggest prayer or curses, or have visions, or even feel lightly touched by a spiritual entity. Some of these phenomena can be attributed to the supernatural, that is, to God, but only when there is convincing proof. Otherwise, when they are suspicious enough, Father Amorth tend to place them in the category of the preternatural, that is, the diabolical. And here's Father Amorth's advice in regard to this. It is always the church that must determine their divine providence. What he recommends first in these cases is not to pay attention to these voices, visions, and interior inspirations, and to refuse these powers expressively, always calling on the Virgin Mary for spiritual help. He also advised a person to place himself in the hands of a spiritual advisor, a priest, who will ponder the matter. In the case of the persistence of the phenomena, one can ask to receive some exorcisms and some prayers of deliverance in order to verify that these powers are not associated, as it often happens, with an evil spell. Never should one feel privileged and therefore inspired to use these powers. It would be like saying yes to the evil one. And because I've just shared this information from Father Amorth with all of you, I like to then share this clip of Father Joseph Iannuzzi, who had the experience of working with Father Amorth during exorcisms.
Yeah, he's seen it all, and he took me to several real possession cases, even of a nun who was possessed. She turned herself over to the devil. Professed female religious becomes possessed by Satan, but it does happen. She abandoned her vows and turned her life around in the wrong direction, but through repeated exorcisms with her, she eventually came around. But Father Amorth was very grounded, very practical, and very humble. He used, whenever I did exorcisms with him, other people, and you don't see that in the film. And it's actually not prudent to do an exorcism alone unless it's an unusual case or where you have no other opportunity, as in the gospel with Christ, Of course, he was God. He didn't need assistance. But Father Amorth, in his humility, knew he didn't have all the gift. So he would avail himself of the expertise of those who did. For example, those who were able to discern the spirits. He would allow them to join in, be them both male and female. And I would assist with another priest and 2 other women, actually. That was normally his team at the time. Sometimes it was 2 other priests. Not only for the discernment or charismatic gifts that they possessed that he did not. He had them, but he didn't have them heightened in every respect as others did, as in certain fields that others did. But also they were there because the possessed, the afflicted, would get violent, and he himself, in his advanced age, couldn't contain them, the individuals. So he would have each of us like hold on to an arm, a leg, things like that. Because once he placed the stole around their neck or on their forehead, or against their throat where the demons collect, and then they would become very violent. They were spiritually allergic and repulsed by anything sacred. And he knew that. And that's exactly why he used those elements to draw them out, to provoke them. Because one thing Satan cannot do is cloak himself with the veil of obedience. He can appear to be a saint, or as St. Paul says, an angel of light, and deceive the masses. But what he cannot do is obey. Father Amorth would put him under obedience in Jesus' name to reveal themselves, these demons and the devil himself.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned a lot from this video. Remember, if there's any feedback or suggestion, please let me know in the comments below. Anyway, if you'd like to support our works and you like what we do, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, stay safe, stay healthy, and may God bless you.
Quick question, Father Dan. The other day you had mentioned you had done an exorcism, and a demon appeared. What do they look like? Are they burn looking? Do they have eyes, ears? Do they have a smell? What do they look like?
Well, sometimes we can see the physical presence of a demon. They can manifest an appearance to people in the room. This just looked like a giant black bat with a female head on it. But that's very rare. More often than that is that they'll manifest within the person. Sometimes the person's eyes will change into snake eyes and be slanted with the yellow color to them.
Yeah.
Things like that. But, we don't want to give too much attention to his tricks and his the ways he attacks people. We just have to remember that they're suffering. These people are suffering, and they really can't get free except for a priest. So not only pray for your priest, but pray for your exorcist priests out there in particular.